I want to welcome everybody to our first webinar of our company BioNeex, which is an online platform for licensing partnerships in biopharmaceutical industry. So we help small biotech companies to create licensing and collaborative partnerships. So since we are in this direction, our main focus is small biotechs. We want to educate our small biotechs. We want to help them. And we want to welcome today our first speaker of our first webinar, Dr. Tina Garyantes. And Dr. Tina Garyantes, she will present herself briefly, and then she will go with the presentation. The presentation will be half hour. Before starting the presentation, I want to ask if anybody against that we will record the presentation and the discussion and share on our YouTube channel or LinkedIn. Please say that you are against that right now. If you say nothing, then we accept that as a agree. So I guess it's agree. Then after presentation, will be a Q&A session. For Q&A session, I would ask you kindly to write in the chat only your name and your company name. Then I will give the word like by the line who wrote his name or her name and the company name, and the person will raise the question directly to Tina, so it will be interactive discussion like happens in conferences. So I will not read your questions, you will raise your own self. So thank you very much. And the stage is yours, Tina. You are welcome.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for attending. I hope you find this talk interesting. By way of background, I've been working in the biotech and pharmaceutical industry for many, many years, having come up from early discovery at Merck and then working at Sanofi, starting in screening and ending up as global head of assay development and screening. Started a company after that, doing high throughput medicinal chemistry, a conservative nature, and then joined Chromocell, where I've been advancing a lead molecule that's about to start its phase 2 trials, did all the partnering for that. Throughout my career, I have both out-licensed and in-licensed technology, as well as created multi-company collaborations for solving various projects. So I'm just going to be talking about one of these cases today. I hope you find it interesting, and we'll ask whatever questions. So now, however, I cannot, oh, there we go. Okay, so Tiger Consultants is my consulting company. We focus on both strategic leadership in multidisciplinary projects and also creating partnerships. Have done that in multiple areas. So I'm going to talk about one particular company that will be Company X for the discussion today. It's been a biotech that's been around for well over 10 years at this point. It has been fully financed from the beginning through research collaborations, which is very unusual, which means that it is 100% owned by the founders. It's never taken any external collaboration money. And at the moment, the CEO is the only active founder in the company. And at the time of this partnering, the only active founder of the company. And it has about 100 people. So just to give you an idea of what the background of the company is, I think it's important when you're thinking about partnerships to really think about what's important to the company that you're working for. In this case, Company X was particularly interested in retaining control and organically growing their business. So the case study that I'll talk about, the project, was an extraordinarily well-validated target. It had human genetics, both knockout, essentially overexpression, underexpression mutations, people who do not express the target do not feel any pain. People who overexpress the target or where the target is overactive have heightened sensitivity of pain. And there were clinical small molecules that existed, and there was hints of proof of concept in various trials that other people had tried to run in the area, but the compounds had all fallen or were in the process of falling at the time of this partnership. But overall, people felt that this was a once in a lifetime type of target with a nice small molecule validation. And preclinically, there was a knockout, and there were antibodies that recapitulated the human phenotypes. So overall, it was very well understood. It was also an extremely well-funded target. Almost all of Big Pharma were working on this target. Some of them had groups of 50 people or more working for 5 or 10 years on the target, and they weren't really getting anywhere. So it put us in a good position to walk into a partnership. We also had a very promising lead. It was a new composition of matter. Patent had been filed, and just recently, so we had a long patent life. It was orally bioavailable, and there were no red flags in any in vitro tox or, I can't read the end of my slide, but there were no red flags moving it forward. There was excellent selectivity and efficacy across many models, and no brain exposure. Although there was a feeling in the field is that brain exposure was necessary to have efficacy. So our rodent models were really surprising people that no brain exposure appeared to be necessary. And we had no toxicity at the maximum administrable dose in a rodent single ascending dose study. So that's kind of what we look like at the time. What's really important to remember is we were at a very early stage of development. This was not an IND or something ready to go into the clinic. We did not have any manufacturing methods. We did not have any repeat dose toxicity. In fact, we didn't have any toxicity outside of the rodents at the time. So as I talk about this moving forward, these are some of the challenges that we had to overcome. So I think when you're thinking about partnering a compound, you need to think about what your goals are. Obviously, almost everyone is there to increase the value of their company. Sometimes you're looking for R&D funding. Sometimes you're looking to license a compound. Sometimes you want to offer an option for the compound. There are different advantages and disadvantages to each of these options, or each of these possibilities. This company, because it had grown through research collaborations, was particularly interested in R&D funding. Interestingly, ultimately, that was not part of the deal. But the company was able to pull an option to get an option, and the option allowed them to grow organically down the pipeline. When you're thinking about an option, I just point out that there are multiple ways of doing an option deal. One is a pre-negotiated option, where you know what the value is going to be if you hit certain milestones. One is a first right to negotiation, which means that a pharmaceutical partner will option the right to essentially purchase the compound at a later point, but you don't know how much it's going to be valued at, and they have the right to negotiate the value with you first. This will tend to limit the value that other people are willing to negotiate with you because they know that. But even worse is a first right of refusal, where the pharmaceutical company can essentially swoop in on any negotiated terms that you have with any other company. So that makes it even harder to do a really strong deal. Just something to think about at the time. Another goal that you might have for your company is to retain control, or maybe you want to give up control. I think you have to be aware of how you want to grow your company and where you want to go. And then you have to think about how you want the company to build. Do you want to expand your staff? Do you want to gain brand exposure? Are you willing to let your potential partner brand the molecule and for you to essentially stay in an early stage. Pharmaceutical companies tend to work at a very different time scale than biotechs. So when you're thinking about the control issue, you also have to think about how will that affect the timeline and how will that affect the timeline of any potential milestones. And none of this is completely black and white, so we'll talk about some of it later on. When you're thinking about reaching out, one of the questions is, do you want to go one-on-one, one by one through potential partners, or do you want to kind of jump in all at once? There's an advantage to going one by one in that you learn a lot through each one of your interactions with potential partners. You get to hear how they're interpreting your pitch, and you get to modify what they're concerned about. You get to maybe do an added experiment or just change your pitch to address whatever concerns that you hear from people. You can also really leverage your personal connections and your network this way. And you remain fresh for any other potential partners, assuming the first company you approach isn't the one that you end up with. On the other hand, there's a big advantage to kind of going out in a big way, and that is that you can attend major conferences and events and give presentations and sessions, and it means that you don't end up traveling quite as much to individual companies. Because you can do it all in one setting. You'll still end up talking to people individually, of course, ultimately, hopefully. But it's just something to think about. I personally like starting out slow and learning as much as I can from the feedback of the companies that you talk to, and then growing it into a much larger networking strategy. You do want to activate your network. You know, basically LinkedIn is a great tool to see who you know any place. In this case, the ultimate company that we partnered with, the initial contact was through an ex-coworker of mine. So it just helps to be able to have that kind of network. If you personally don't have the network that goes into pretty much all of the pharmas, then there are business development consultants out there that pretty much know all the companies and can recommend who to approach and get in. Of course, all of the big pharmas have websites that list what they're interested in, and they have partnering teams that look at potential opportunities on those websites. But the truth is that there are thousands of opportunities bombarding those teams, and a personal in is worth a lot more than a blind email going out. And then, of course, BioNeex has put together a really interesting platform that gives you visibility into global partnerships. So I'm sure that we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. When you're reaching out with your pitch, many early stage companies still think if they show a lot of efficacy, that's really all they need to show. And I will say that when you're looking at a partnership, assuming that you're actually trying to partner a compound and not a research project, essentially, the efficacy is just the tip of the iceberg. You need to speak of efficacy, sure, but also of what is the safety and the tolerability as much as you possibly know. What do you know about manufacturing? Is this scalable? Have you thought about and do you know how to move it forward into the clinic or a regulatory path? What is the competition? Not only biologically, but also in your clinical and regulatory path. People want to know that you are really well in tune with what's going on there, and you know what the risks are, both commercially as well as scientifically. And then, of course, everyone wants a very long patent life. And it is true that when you're done with your clinical trials, you can get extra time put onto your patent life, but the longer you have, the more valuable your asset is. So sometimes I've seen people walk away from very useful compounds because they don't have enough patent life to really get the interest that is needed. And then you cannot underestimate how important your story is. And people want to know who you are, who is your team. Very rarely do you want to go out there as a single person and try and sell something. People want to know that they're investing in a team, they're investing in a team that has experience, they're investing in a team that works well together. And most importantly, they're investing in a team that they can trust. They need to be able to trust you because no matter how much due diligence they're going to do, and they will do a tremendous amount of due diligence, they need to trust that the people at the company have the data that's supporting the claims. They'll ask to see it, but people can shade their data. They can not tell all the truth. They need to form a very strong trust with you. And they're going to be working with you unless you do a complete license deal. They're going to be working with you for a while, so they want to make sure that you're someone that they feel they can work with, they can add value to them. It is, very common that you're going to talk to a lot of different companies. I just put together, and you'll see this graph in a few different forms moving forward. You are going to be talking to many companies. I guess in this case, we talked to 18 different companies to a point where we had some face-to-face interaction with them. And you can see from our first reach out to a company to when we actually partnered this molecule was actually a very long time. It was almost 2 years. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the things that happened at these various companies. So on the x-axis, it's just the company number, and on the y-axis is the day since the first business development interaction. The interactions could be us going to their company and meeting them. It could be opening a database. It could be the company coming in and doing a due diligence, either a visit to you or an on-site due diligence to look through your data. You also have to think about chemistry due diligence. When do you expose the compound to someone, and how do you do that? And then people will ask for material transfer agreements, studies done under a material transfer agreement. Again, you need to think long and hard about how those are done and what you're going to agree to or not. And then there are interactions that have to do with negotiation of contracts. So I thought it was interesting to kind of look at all of these interactions that I have here. And I didn't put dots on this graph for the various emails going back and forth, many of them with, answering hundreds of questions actually. But, just the face-to-face meetings. So in blue, I have the people generally that started with an on-site visit. So they invited, there was probably an hour-long teleconference with a non-confidential deck because they don't want to risk contaminating their internal work with knowing too much about your compound until they have a significant amount of confidence that it's worthy of them to potentially risk their internal program. And then they will likely, or at some points, ask you for an on-site visit where you talk to them and present at a confidential level. They will also, fairly early on in many of the discussions, is to ask to open a data room where they're looking to actually see in-depth raw data of some of your programs. Generally, at some point, they're going to ask for an on-site due diligence. Typically, that is done without sharing any chemistry. And then a chemistry due diligence, which is generally blinded to the company. So you're talking to an external chemist who has a CDA with the company that's coming through. And then they get a report from the third-party chemist. All of these interactions are excellent times for you to get feedback on how others in the real world view your program, what its strengths and weaknesses are. And generally, the third-party chemists have a tremendous amount of experience. So we actually, got some very good ideas of where to go in synthetic methods and things like that. from some of these discussions. But whoever your potential partner is will probably sign the partnership agreement only seeing the compound maybe the day of or something like that, because they do not want to, in all likelihood, contaminate any internal research by having the possibility of knowing what your compound is. Then another potential interaction you'll have with partners is them asking to do some studies with your compound under a material transfer agreement or an MTA. There are some big advantages to doing this. You get free data. Generally, you want to make sure that you structure those agreements such that any work that's done by by your potential partner is your property at the end of the study. You also will probably learn differences in the way that they do their studies from how you've been doing studies, and sometimes you get some surprises in how the compound works. That certainly happened in this case. But on the other hand, if you get some positive data, that gives you a lot of confidence, and you can then, even if you don't ultimately sign a partnership deal with the company who did the MTA studies, you can walk into the next company and say that you have data that was performed by a major pharmaceutical company, and it gives them a lot more confidence that everything you're showing them is just not what your team has been doing. There are some disadvantages. Early on in almost every program, you are limited by the amount of drug substance you have, and some of these studies will require a significant amount of drug substance, and so you have to balance the cost and the timing of getting that material versus the value of doing the studies. The people who are running the MTA studies of the pharmaceutical companies, this is not their highest priority work, typically. And so they are not necessarily motivated to make the compound work or to understand any difficulties that they have in their studies. So you can get some negative results that could tarnish the value of your compound, even though you are not necessarily obligated to share that information with other people. But you really need to make sure that if you do MTA studies, I would never promise another pharmaceutical company that you'll share information from an ongoing study that's not under your control, because you just don't know how that is going to move forward and what issues are going to happen. And then another thing to consider is whether or not you negotiate the contract before you have a commitment from a company. So in this example study, we chose to negotiate contracts with some potential partners before they did MTA studies, so that we felt that the value of a potential partnership was worth overcoming some of our hesitation in doing MTA studies, or our hesitation in sharing the chemistry even with a third-party chemist. You do have to realize that once a company has positive data with your compound, your value just went up. It's in their hands, no matter how much you tell them it works, how beautiful it is. They're not really going to believe it until they have kicked the tires a little bit. That may limit how much they're willing to value the negotiation. It also may mean that you're negotiating with multiple companies at once. Ideally, at the end, you will have multiple companies that are competing with each other for your compound. That will increase its value tremendously. And that is what happened here. So you'll see the ultimate deal is a phenomenal deal for an early stage compound. And a lot of that is because not only the value of the target, but because we had multiple partners who were willing to compete with each other. So just to give you an idea, the amount of work that goes into setting up a partnership is actually tremendous. Some of the companies listed here don't have very many arrows. That we had basically teleconferences with them that we talked through. But you can see many of the companies we did some combination of very in-depth work with them. And, you know, almost all the companies, all the serious companies, there were probably dozen or several dozen telephone calls going back and forth as to what, before discussions on top of what's here and answering of questions and detailed discussion of what's going on. So all of that said, if you can look here, you can see that the two companies that were really active at the very end, which was the 7th one we had spoken to and the 17th one that we had spoken to, were basically competing at the end. And so that allowed us to play them off against each other. One of them already had a compound in the area, which gave us some leverage to carve out the deal a little bit. But ultimately, we had a significant payoff. So if you remember my early slide, this was a preclinical compound well before IND, actually before the IND enabling studies, with no manufacturing data and only rodent data at this point. But we were able to get a deal that was 15 million up front, 500 million plus in royalties, in milestones, and royalties starting at 10%. And going up from there, which I would venture is closer to a typical IND or proof of concept kind of partnership. And we were also able to argue for co-development and co-promotion rights, which very much increased the value of the deal for us, particularly as a company that was interested in moving into becoming a true pharmaceutical company and not just an early stage drug compound discovery kind of company. Also, very unusually, it was a partnership for a single compound. So we actually retained rights to develop any other compounds in the series, and we have quite a few compounds in this series that we can develop. And we retained all veterinary and diagnostic rights, even to the one compound that was partnered. And so all of this increases the total value of the partnership. And I think, it is also very important to remember the extras. So you really want to make sure that your partnership increases your likelihood of success. In this case, we were able to get a commitment to run at least 2 proof of concept trials from the partner, which essentially doubles your probability that, in 2 different indications, so that at least doubles the probability that you're likely to show proof of concept. We gained the ability to build the company. That was very useful. Having those carve-outs also added considerable value, and you can't underestimate the value of reversion rights. Thankfully, we haven't used them yet, but you want to make sure that if anything goes wrong, or in the very likely event that your potential partner decides to change their strategy and get rid of your therapeutic area, or there's a new head of the therapeutic area that changes and decides that they no longer want to work with you on this, you need to retain not only the value of the compound, but also make sure that you can take back all of their data, everything they've learned about the compound in the interim, and be able to walk into another partnership with the same molecule. So that's just a quick update on the program, and I guess I'm happy to take any questions that people have.
Thank you, Tina. Thank you for a great presentation. Indeed, we have already first question from Syra from Assay Pharmaceuticals. Syra, please go ahead and introduce briefly your company, where your focus of research is mainly, and ask your questions. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Amber. Hi, Tina. Thank you so much for an excellent presentation. So we are a small company based in Menlo Park, California, and we are developing 2 compounds, actually. Our lead drug is called ES3000, which is a drug that's already approved in China for rheumatoid arthritis. And there's new information about this drug that it inhibits a critical cancer stem cell survival pathway. So what we are doing, we are developing this drug for leukemia, specifically for refractory and relapsed acute myeloid leukemia. And we also have another compound called ES4000, which we are developing for pancreatic cancer. It's a compound that inhibits short-lived proteins such as cyclin 1, MCL1, and CMEC. So my question is really regarding when you talked about on-site due diligence. I think in you mentioned that not to include chemistry. And I guess my question is that, when people start, interested parties start doing due diligence, that's one of the things that they're really interested in. I mean, how many opportunities would you lose if you don't talk about chemistry in the early stages? I mean, and I'm talking about following CDA, obviously, CDA execution.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to lose any opportunities if you demur away from identifying the actual molecule. Now, of course, even if you're in the clinic, they're not going to know. They will not necessarily know. You have to assess how likely it is that they know what the compound is anyway. Because of course you have a patent estate and there may have been some other disclosure. But assuming that you have not disclosed which compound it is that you're moving forward, I think as long as you talk about, we would give information on the number of synthetic steps, the feasibility of manufacture, all of the chemical properties of the molecule, stability, physical, metabolic stability, et cetera. And of course, you are going to ultimately need to do a due diligence with a blinded third-party chemist. But we certainly didn't have anyone walk away from the partnership because we didn't share what the exact structure of the molecule was.
Okay, great. So what you're basically saying that don't show the structure, but you can talk about pretty much everything else.
Yes.
Right? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That makes, yeah. Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah. We can't hear you, Sabat. You're muted.
Thank you very much, Sarah, for your question. Thank you also for answering. We don't have now another question until now besides Sarah to written. However, if the participants feel comfortable, I would ask kindly to go ahead and also, like Sarah did, briefly present their company, where they're located, what their main focus of research, and also then discuss what's basically their current partnering concerns and efforts. Thank you very much.
Hi, this is Enrique from InBio. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, yeah, fantastic. So yeah, so essentially we are a vaccine company. We are developing a number of vaccines against infectious diseases. So we have our lead product is against pneumococcal disease. We have the product, in fact, is at the phase 2 stage. So we have already phase 1 data. And we have our efforts are focusing on partnering with the big companies, obviously, but we have big competition as well there. So what we are doing is we are reaching tier 2 companies because we think that probably they will be most interesting to enter the game. We also talk to local players. So we are currently talking to the largest Chinese company that they will be interested probably in licensing the technology. But it's a difficult, I think it's a cultural barrier as well. And it just proven to be a little bit complex really to negotiate deals with someone who is that far away.
Yeah, I think that's true. My recommendation would be to get someone to act as an intermediary who is either culturally Chinese or works in China. It's not only the physical distance. It's also a huge cultural difference and a huge difference in the attitude toward intellectual property. So you have to be much more cautious when working in the Chinese market for partnerships. But for both Japan and for China, although we didn't really go after any Chinese partnerships, but certainly in Japan, we did early on have someone who could help us with the discussions.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sarah wants to comment. Please go ahead.
Yeah, hi Enrique. I just wanted to let you know that we are actually we have a Chinese partner currently, and you're correct that there's a lot of differences. And I actually just got back from Shanghai with a meeting with our partner, and just wanted to let you know what has worked for us really nicely to work with this partner is that we have a consultant who's fluent in Chinese. He actually lives there half the time in Shanghai and half the year here in the United States. And of course, he's an expert in manufacturing. This is our manufacturing partner, by the way. So I would suggest highly that you perhaps reach out or try to find a consultant who works in the Chinese market and who understands sort of the culture. And it was an excellent trip because we were able to go. We had 2 days long meeting, plus we met a few other interested parties there, and it worked really smoothly having someone who knows the area very well, who knows the culture, and who could just really facilitate meetings. And even though our partners do speak English, but there were a lot of attendees in some of the meetings that did not speak. So it was really good to have someone who could translate back and forth.
Yeah, really appreciate it. We had one of those consultants, and the problem is that we have been trouble really just getting rid of him as well. Because they wanted to own the connection, and it's very difficult to transfer that ownership really of the relation. So having a little bit of those kind of challenges, but I think we will get there. We've been there as well to China, so hopefully we will get there.
Okay, good.
No, thank you. Thanks a lot.
Sure.
Yeah.
Is there anybody else? I would suggest, Pablo, you are there. We actually have a great discussion a few days ago with Pablo, and he has very interesting compound in Parkinson's disease. He's looking for funding. Pablo, if you feel free, go and present your case. Might be some good tips, helps from Tina's side or our participants. Thank you. Okay, he needs like 1 second. I think he's like on a technical side.
Hello guys, this is Pablo.
Hi, Pablo.
I'm sorry, I was talking to someone else. First of all, thank you very much for this opportunity, Simbad and Tina. It was very interesting to see your presentation. We're very far behind in our, let's say, in our company life, but I expect these things that we're talking about to be in our scope of problems in the near future. I just wanted to, like Simbad said, introduce myself and the company. We have a compound that is applicable to Parkinson's disease. In particularly, it's an anti-dyskinetic that has been proven to reduce dyskinesia 48% in animal models. Actually, we have 2 preclinical trials. And actually, nowadays we are looking for fundings to perform our proof of concept in humans. I guess that's a fair introduction.
And where are you in your toxicology studies and manufacturing?
No, we are very far behind. We are just we just have perform these preclinical studies. Actually, one of them is for the motor functions. This is the numbers I just told you. The other was to prove the capacity of the compound as a neuroprotective, and it has proven to slow down the progression of the disease by 79%. It's a compound that it's actually an endogenous neuromodulator. So it's a product that has no side effects, no toxicity. We have another test in animals, and it has been given to humans too, and it's been proven to not develop any toxicity or side effects.
Okay. And where are you located?
All our medical research is being developed in Spain.
Okay.
So we are actually nowadays we incorporated the company in the States because it's simpler and faster. Since we are now in search of this capital round, we plan to incorporate an affiliate or something like that accordingly to the geography of the money, of where the money comes from.
Right.
We are looking for money in Spain because our scientists are mostly Spanish. They are very well known in Spain and Europe in general. So we are knocking doors there, and everybody is saying you should open a company in Spain. So that's what we are doing as we speak.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. You know, I know there are quite a few European granting agencies where, you know, if you can get a three-way between academia, industry, and the small company, like a big pharma and the small company, really what the pharmaceutical company is lending you is their name. And that might be a good early funding mechanism to get to a point where you have enough data that pharma will really talk to you on, because it sounds like you're a little bit early to really take it forward to them. Yeah, you're going to need to be able to figure out something else. In the U.S., you know, if you incorporate in the U.S., you can apply for SBIR funding, which is relatively easy grant money, but of course it takes many months before it comes through. So that's a trade-off, unfortunately. Go ahead.
No, I'm just nodding. You're saying yes. Yes, I know. You're right.
I would. The other thing to think about is societies. So Parkinson's in particular has, you know, the Michael J. Fox Society Foundation that is often looking, and they have another one too that actually funds a significant amount of research, and not those offer significant opportunity not only for funding but also to create a buzz about what you're doing and create partnerships. So I think that's another place to look early on. Recently, the Department of Defense in the U.S. has been putting out a whole bunch of grant applications in areas. I don't remember whether Parkinson's was one of the targeted areas, but I think it usually is. So someplace else to go. But I would talk to a few pharma and just see what they think they'd like to see before they're willing to put in any money. And also consider the pharmaceutical venture groups, which are often quite separate from the companies they come out of, but are willing to jump into much earlier programs.
Okay, that's interesting. Maybe I could throw you a mail, and maybe you can give me a couple of names or contacts in that respect.
Sure. Happy to
Great.
do
that would be great. Yeah. In terms of the MJF Fox Foundation, yes, it closes on September. It's not yet open, but of course we are going to present this year. Yeah.
Yeah. But you can, talk to some people within the foundation and just get an idea of how to best position the application.
Yeah, we are starting to do that, to reaching out to them. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I just found you on LinkedIn and sent you a request of connection, so maybe we can keep talking through LinkedIn a little bit. I have a couple of questions that will follow your words today, so that would be great if you can give me some seconds of your time. Thank you.
Happy to do it.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Sarah, go ahead and ask your question, please.
Okay, thank you. Hi, Tina. I just have a quick question. When you gave the example of the company that you did the partnering deal, and maybe you mentioned that, and maybe I missed it. But did the company already have had patents granted, or did they just have the applications filed at the time?
They only had the applications filed.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sarah. Lionel, please go ahead, and this stage is yours.
Okay, I'm Lionel. I'm from France, and I'm working in a small company called LZD Biotech, who is developing therapy with antibodies, especially on the immuno-oncology market. So at the moment, we are in discussion about one of our products with one of the top 5 pharma, and we should have a term sheet in the coming days. Previously, we have signed an MTA with big pharma, and they reproduced all the result we obtained previously. So it was a very good news for us. And now we are preparing for our negotiation for the term sheet, I think, because we are in a kind of a due diligence for IP and technical points.
Sure.
Okay. So I think I have, my point is, do you have some advice for strategy to negotiate a term sheet or something like that?
A few general points. One is I would keep reaching out to other people, because if you can get a second company to also offer a term sheet, then you can play them against each other.
Okay.
Which will invariably increase the value. A second point is don't act too eager. There's definitely a little bit of acting involved in these negotiations.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm trying to think what else I can tell you. I think if you go back to one of my slides, looking at, really think through what is most valuable to you. What do you want to look like at the end? Is it all about getting proper funding? Is it all about moving the project forward as much as possible? Giving the best chance to the project? It's easy to focus on what the milestones and royalties are going to be, but some of those other things will ultimately potentially have more value to you than just the milestones and royalties. One of the things I didn't mention is that the original deal that we were offered by our ultimate partner was actually $38 million up front, and we decided to ask them to lower that in exchange for more royalties, and also speeding up some of the earlier milestones and giving us more control in the development. So you do have to balance a little bit as to what your needs are.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you have specific questions. I'm happy to talk to you offline or whatever.
Okay, I think I will connect to you by LinkedIn. I think.
Okay.
Okay.
No problem.
Thank you very much.
So, is there any other question? So it seems like no other question there. I would perhaps then introduce briefly also in the call our two team members, Laima and Alice. Laima is mostly, she's for client contacts. She helps as a first contact to understand your partnering needs and your interest. And then we have Alice. Alice, she has a great experience in big pharmaceutical companies, and she's very helpful to understand more your scientific needs, as well as we help our potential clients, our clients, to create 2 pages PDF documents, which will be commercially more presentable to upload in our website. So please welcome to reach us out if you have any questions, as well as our goal is with this webinar to create this kind of small network between small biotechs that they can help each other to grow, because I think it's sometimes very hard to understand what really big pharma needs. And a person like Tina provides really great information, great value. And we will continue to do our webinar sessions, and we will be always happy to have you in the call. Yeah, maybe like few words ending our webinar. Tina, would you like to go ahead and yeah, say something? Thank you.
No, I mean, I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm glad that I hope you found this valuable. And if you have any questions or you just need a little hand holding, I'm happy to support you as much as I can.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And it was a wonderful presentation, a wonderful Q&A session. So we have today a very small group, but we will continue, and in the future we will planning also do panel discussion, take a certain subject and have 3 speakers. So we want to bring everything what's happened offline in the online world. Have a wonderful day. Some of them are in Europe, some of them in US. And yeah, enjoy your evening or your afternoon. Thank you very much. All the best. Bye-bye.
Thank you.